The city was alive with noise that afternoon. Cars rushing by, people hurrying across sidewalks, vendors shouting about fresh fruit and hot food. But at the very edge of the park, on a cracked bench near the fountain, sat a boy who seemed invisible to everyone. His name was Malik. He was no more than 12, thin from hunger, his clothes too big for his body, and worn from too many nights spent under the open sky. His curly hair stuck out in little tufts, and his shoes had holes that let in both dust and rain. In his lap rested the only treasure he owned, a weathered, spiral-bound notebook filled with crooked handwriting, sketches, and stories he'd written when nights felt too cold or mornings too lonely. While others saw just another homeless child, Malik carried inside him something different, a strange kind of faith his late grandmother had planted in him. She had once told him, "God listens to the pure-hearted, Malik. And sometimes, your words can touch places doctors and money cannot." Malik never forgot those words. As he scribbled in his notebook that day, he noticed a tall man walking slowly along the path, his expensive suit looking strangely out of place in the park. The man's face was pale, his shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world pressed on them. His polished shoes crunched over the gravel. Yet he barely noticed where he was stepping. His eyes were far away, haunted, broken. That man was Richard Harrington, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the city. But Malik didn't know that. All Malik saw was a father whose heart was drowning in sorrow. Richard stopped near the fountain, staring at the water as if hoping to see an answer ripple back. He pulled a photo from his wallet. A little girl with golden hair and bright eyes, smiling as if she were sunshine itself. Sophia, his daughter. She had been lying in a hospital bed for months, silent, unmoving. Trapped in a coma that no doctor could heal. Richard had paid for the best treatments, the best specialists, but still, nothing. The weight of helplessness gnawed at him, turning even his wealth into something useless. Malik watched him for a while, his small hands clutching the notebook. Something stirred in his chest, a pull stronger than fear. He stood up and walked toward the man. People usually ignored Malik, or shooed him away, but he felt no hesitation now. "Sir," Malik said softly, his voice trembling but steady enough to be heard. Richard blinked and turned, startled to see a ragged boy standing before him. "What is it? Do you need money?" His tone was wary, not unkind, but carrying the impatience of a man who had been asked that question 100 times before. Malik shook his head. "I don't need money." He hesitated, then pointed to the photo in Richard's hand. "That's your daughter, right?" Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes," he answered cautiously. "Why do you ask?" Malik swallowed hard, his heart pounding. He didn't know if the man would laugh at him, or yell, or walk away. But he spoke anyway, with a strange certainty shining in his eyes. "Because," Malik said, his voice steady now, "I can wake her." Richard froze. For a long heavy moment, all he could do was stare at the boy. The words sounded absurd, impossible. A homeless child, claiming he could do what the greatest doctors could not. It felt like an insult, or maybe the cruel trick of a desperate world. His first instinct was to dismiss the boy entirely. But then Richard looked closer. Malik's eyes weren't mocking. They weren't greedy. They held something Richard hadn't seen in months. Hope. And though it sounded unbelievable, something in Richard's broken heart whispered, "What if?" Richard Harrington's chest tightened as the boy's words echoed in his ears. "I can wake her." It was nonsense, wasn't it? How could a child from the streets do what the finest doctors from New York to Paris had failed at? And yet, Richard didn't walk away. Something in the boy's eyes had caught him. Something innocent, unwavering, almost fearless. "Do you know what you're saying?" Richard asked, his voice sharp, betraying both disbelief and the raw pain beneath it. Malik didn't flinch. He hugged his notebook closer, as if it were his shield. "Yes, sir. I know. I don't have medicine, I don't have money. But my grandma, she always told me I had a gift. She said words can reach where medicine can't. I believe your daughter can still hear. She just needs someone to call her back." Richard's lips parted, but no words came. Call her back. For months, Sophia had lain silent, her world locked away beyond reach. He had spoken to her, begged her, prayed over her. But the boy spoke with such conviction it unsettled him. The businessman's mind wrestled between logic and desperation. Logic said this was madness. Just a child clinging to superstition. But desperation made even the impossible sound worth trying. And Richard was a father in despair. Stripped of everything except the ache to see his little girl's eyes open again. Why would you even care? Richard asked finally, suspicion edging his tone. What do you gain from this? Malik lowered his gaze for a moment, then lifted it with quiet honesty. Nothing. I know what it feels like to lose someone. I couldn't save my grandma when she got sick. But maybe I can help someone else, maybe I can help her. The words pierced Richard's heart in a way no polished speech ever could. For a long moment, he simply stared at the boy. Around them, the city kept moving, people rushing, cars honking, life pressing forward, but Richard stood still, fighting tears. At last, he let out a shaky breath. You want to try? Fine, come with me. Malik blinked, startled. You'll let me see her? Richard nodded, though uncertainty trembled in his voice. Yes. But if this is some cruel trick? His tone hardened. I swear I'll. It's not a trick, Malik interrupted gently, almost pleading. Please sir. Trust me, just once. Something in that soft voice unraveled the last of Richard's resistance. He gestured for the boy to follow. The contrast was jarring when they reached the mansion later that evening. Malik's eyes widened as the gates opened to reveal a sprawling estate with marble steps, gleaming chandeliers visible through towering windows, and fountains larger than the one he had sat by earlier. Yet despite the grandeur, the house felt heavy with silence, like a palace built of sorrow. Inside, Richard led Malik down long, echoing hallways until they reached a room guarded by 2 nurses. They glanced at Malik with disbelief. One even whispered, Sir, is this wise? Richard silenced them with a look. He opened the door. There, on a large canopy bed, lay Sophia. She looked like an angel in slumber, her golden hair fanned across the pillow, her small hands pale against the sheets. Machines hummed softly around her, keeping rhythm with the fragile breaths she still drew. Malik's throat tightened. For a moment, fear clawed at him. What if he failed? But then he remembered his grandmother's words. When you speak from love, the soul listens. Clutching his notebook, Malik stepped toward the bed. He lowered himself onto his knees beside Sophia, his voice barely above a whisper. Hi, Sophia. He began gently, as if speaking to a friend. My name's Malik. I know you're tired, but I also know you can hear me. I brought you a story. It's about a princess who's lost in the dark, and a little boy who carries a lantern. Richard stood at the foot of the bed, his heart pounding, watching the boy with an intensity that bordered on desperation. Every word felt like a fragile thread stretched across the abyss of hopelessness. Could it be possible? Could this boy truly reach where doctors could not? The room held its breath. The air inside Sophia's room was heavy, as if every breath carried years of waiting. The hum of machines and the steady beep of monitors were the only reminders that life still pulsed within her fragile body. Malik sat close to the bedside, his knees pressed into the soft carpet, his small hands clutching the notebook so tightly his knuckles whitened. His heart pounded, but his voice was calm when he spoke again. Once upon a time, Malik whispered, there was a little princess who lived in a kingdom full of sunshine. She laughed, and she danced, and she made everyone happy. But one day, a shadow fell over the land, and the princess fell into a deep sleep. The people tried everything to wake her, medicine, magic songs. But nothing worked. Mochard stood behind him, motionless, his eyes locked on his daughter's face. He wanted to believe, but fear gnawed at him. How many times had he stood there, holding Sophia's hand, begging her to come back? Could this boy truly make a difference? Malik continued, his voice low but steady, carrying a strange rhythm that filled the silence. But there was also a boy in that kingdom, he said softly. He wasn't rich. He didn't have much at all. But he carried something no one else had. A little lantern that never went out. It was lit with hope. The boy believed the princess could hear him, even though she looked asleep. So he went to her side and said, don't be afraid. Follow my light. Come back to us. Malik's hand, trembling slightly, reached for Sophia's. Her skin was cool, almost weightless in his grasp. He closed his eyes, pressing his forehead against the edge of the bed, whispering words that weren't part of the story now, but part of his heart. You're not alone, Sophia. I know it's dark where you are. But there's still light here. Your dad is waiting for you. Don't stay in the dark. Please come back. The nurses in the corner exchanged doubtful glances. To them, this was nothing more than a child's wishful thinking. But Richard couldn't look away. Something about the scene felt sacred, like watching a prayer take shape. And then, it happened. At first, it was subtle, so subtle Richard thought his mind was playing tricks. Sophia's fingers twitched in Malik's hand. Just once. Barely a movement at all. Richard gasped. Did you see that? He whispered hoarsely. The nurses froze, their eyes darting to the monitors. A slight change flickered in the readings, small but undeniable. Malik didn't stop, he squeezed her hand gently, his voice urgent but tender. The princess isn't gone, Malik whispered. She's just lost. But she can follow the light. Sophia, please follow it back. Her eyelids fluttered. Once. As though her soul were struggling against the weight of sleep. A faint sound escaped her lips. So soft it was almost a sigh. One of the nurses clapped a hand over her mouth in shock. The other rushed to the bedside, checking her pulse, her breathing, the monitors. Everything showed signs of change. Richard's knees buckled. He stumbled forward, tears spilling down his face as he whispered his daughter's name. Sophia! Oh God, Sophia! Her lips moved again. No words, just the fragile stirring of life. And in that moment, every person in the room knew something unbelievable was happening. The room seemed to hold its breath. Every tick of the monitor, every whisper of the machines felt louder than thunder. Malik's small hand still held Sophia's, as if he were pouring every ounce of faith inside him into her fragile body. Then, all at once, Sophia's lips parted. At first it was only a faint sound. A breath, a murmur. But to Richard it was more powerful than the roar of the ocean. His heart leaped into his throat. He staggered forward, clutching the footboard of the bed for support. Hardly daring to believe what his eyes told him. Sophia. He whispered, his voice trembling. The girl's lashes quivered, and slowly, as if fighting against the weight of the world, her eyelids lifted. Blue eyes, dull with exhaustion but alive, blinked up at the ceiling. Her gaze wandered, unfocused, until it found the figure at the edge of the bed. Daddy. The word came out like a breathless sigh. Cracked and broken from months of silence, but it was enough. Richard dropped to his knees beside the bed, his composure shattering as tears streamed freely down his cheeks. Oh God, oh! My baby girl! His hands shook as he touched her face, afraid she might vanish light if he held too tightly. The nurses rushed forward, checking her vitals, their stunned expressions betraying their disbelief. This is impossible. One whispered under her breath. Patients don't just wake like this. But Richard wasn't listening. All his world, all his soul, was wrapped up in the girl before him. Malik stayed kneeling quietly, tears brimming in his own eyes, not from sadness but from something deeper. Something like awe. He had believed she could hear, and now she had answered. Sophia's gaze shifted toward him. Her small, trembling hand slipped from her father's grasp and reached for Malik instead. The boy. She whispered faintly. Richard turned sharply, following her eyes. Malik lowered his head, almost ashamed to be noticed. You heard him? Richard asked, his voice breaking. Sophie's lips curved into the faintest smile. He called me back. The room fell silent again. But this silence was different. It wasn't heavy with despair anymore, but filled with reverence, as if something holy had just taken place. Richard looked at Malik, really looked at him for the first time. Not as a homeless boy in torn clothes, not as a stranger who had spoken impossible words in a park. But as the one who had reached where all others had failed. How? Richard asked in a hushed voice, his eyes wide with wonder. Malik swallowed, clutching his notebook tighter to his chest. I don't know, sir. I believed she was still listening. I thought maybe if someone reminded her she wasn't alone, she'd find her way back. The nurses exchanged glances, still baffled, but unable to deny what they had just witnessed. Richard placed a trembling hand on Malik's shoulder. Son, you've given me back my world. His voice cracked, thick with emotion. I don't know I could ever repay you. Malik shook his head quickly. I don't need anything, sir. Just be happy she's awake. That's enough. But Richard knew it wasn't enough. In his heart, he realized this boy hadn't just given him his daughter back. he had given him hope. Something that even wealth and power could never buy. The sun had dipped low on the horizon by the time the mansion quieted. Nurses still bustled in and out, doctors called in urgently to confirm the unbelievable. But Sophia was awake, truly awake. She clung to her father's hand, her frail voice growing stronger with each word she spoke. And through it all, Malik sat quietly by the corner of the room, notebook clutched to his chest, almost afraid that if he moved, the miracle might dissolve. He wasn't used to belonging anywhere. The streets had been his home, shadows his companions, hunger his teacher. But now, here he was, sitting in a golden room, watching a father cradle his daughter with tears of joy. Richard finally looked over and beckoned him forward. "Malik," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Come here." The boy hesitated, then shuffled closer. Sophia's eyes lit up when she saw him. "Daddy, this is the boy I told you about, the one with the lantern." Richard froze, chills racing down his spine. You saw him." Sophia nodded weakly. "It was so dark, I was lost. But then I saw a little boy holding a light. He said I wasn't alone. He said to come back." Her tiny hand reached for Malik's, gripping his fingers with surprising strength. It was him. The room fell into stunned silence again. The nurses, who had been skeptical, exchanged looks of disbelief. Richard, however, felt tears burn his eyes anew. He cupped Malik's face gently in his large, trembling hands. "You're not just some boy off the streets," he whispered hoarsely. "You're the answer to my prayers." Malik blinked rapidly, his lips trembling. I just did what my grandma told me. She said love can reach where nothing else can." Richard pulled him into an embrace, the kind of hug Malik hadn't felt in years. The strong, protective kind that spoke of belonging, of safety, of family. "From this day forward," Richard said firmly, "you will never be alone again." Sophia's tired voice chimed in, soft but filled with certainty. "He's my brother now, Daddy. Can he stay with us forever?" Richard looked down at her, then at Malik. His answer was immediate, without hesitation. "Yes, sweetheart, he belongs with us." And so, the boy who once slept on park benches and clutched a notebook to keep hope alive found himself in a warm home, sitting at a dinner table where laughter returned, and falling asleep in a bed where nightmares no longer chased him. Malik was no longer invisible. He was a son, a brother, a miracle in himself. And Richard Harrington, once a man with all the wealth in the world, but no hope, now understood that sometimes, the greatest treasures come not from money or power, but from the smallest, most unexpected hearts. The homeless boy had woken more than just a little girl. He had woken a father's faith, a family's joy, and a future no one could have imagined. A new family was born that day, not through blood, but through love.